Hi guys, once again I am back with another offering from Runcam. And for those of you who are probably wondering where the Runcam Racer 2 Part 2 video is, it is in the making and will be here soon. But for today we are looking at Runcam's new camera, the Robin. So what is the Robin? It's actually a budget micro camera from Runcam. Now personally I didn't think Runcam's range was that expensive, but they've done us a favour here by bringing us out this budget camera. And to bring this camera in on budget, they've had to do away with some of the features that are now standard. Now this camera has a 700 TV line 4:3 ratio and a CMOS sensor with 6 milliseconds latency. It's available with two lens options, a 1.8 m8 with a field of view of 160 degrees and a 2.1 m8 with a 145 degrees field of view. Now the first thing I noticed about this was this nice foam pad that goes all the way around, and the actual plastic shielding itself goes fully to the edges instead of leaving some of the PCB exposed at the front. So this has a little bit more crash protection than some of the other micro cameras on the market. So looking on the rear, we do not have as many pins as we're used to. We've only got the basics, so we've got 5 to 36 volts in, ground, video, and then we've got ground and menu to change the OSD options. You can switch between PAL and NTSC by shorting those two pins and then powering up. I decided to pop it open and have a quick look inside. We can see here the purple tinge to this lens, the RC18M. The purple part just filters out all of the infrared light. And here we have our nice 700 TV line sensor. We have lots of that foam padded all around it, which not only will help towards its ingress protection, but also some of the light leakage that may come from the sides. Peeling off the protective backing shows us the rear, and we can see that it's a less cluttered micro board. And that's to be expected really when we've lost our camera control functions and our voltage reading sensor. And to be honest, it probably won't be a big issue. I don't use the voltage from the camera anyway. I use the voltage readout from my flight controller. And it's really impressive how small these components really are these days. So moving on to the rest of the equipment you get with it, we have a cable here to obviously run it to a flight controller or VTX, and a micro to full size mounting bracket with the associated screws. So you may notice that you are missing the actual joystick controller. Most of us have one of these lying around anyway, so it's not too much of an issue, but if this is going to be your first camera and you want to change some of the settings, you might need to grab yourself a joystick controller. So here's a Swift 2 Micro, and you can see that the PCB is way more exposed than it is on the Runcam Robin, but the dimensions remain pretty much the same. So I decided to fit this inside one of my freestyle frames, and what we're going to try and do is compare the Runcam Robin versus the Runcam Swift 2. Now I want to run both of the cameras at the same time on the same quad and have two DVRs on the ground recording from different channels, because the only way to fairly test a camera is to fly it at exactly the same time as its competing camera, because light conditions will change. Even between that 1 or 2 minutes it takes you to swap a LiPo, plus you can't hit the same lines exactly the same every time. So this is our setup, two cameras on the one quad with two video transmitters going out on two separate channels, which are then recorded by DVRs on the ground and then played back at the same time. Now you're going to notice a major flaw here. Using two different types of DVRs, they have different bit rates and resolutions, so you can see that this isn't really good enough and conclusive enough for a fair test between the two cameras. So on the left I do have the Robin, and on the right is the Runcam Micro Swift 2. So I'm going to have to shoot this part all over again, but we're going to use two separate fat shocks with the same cameras. But it is nice to see here that we've got excellent wide dynamic range as promised, and I think that's one of the best things about this camera. So let's move to the next day when I tried a different DVR. Okay, so on to the next day. Now I'm using my Fat Shark DVR, and on the right hand side I'm using a docking DVR. Now I've checked on both of these DVRs and both of them run motion JPEG at 30 frames a second, but unfortunately I'm not sure on the bit rates. Now you'll have to forgive the sidebars on the Runcam Robin. That is just the carbon fibre frame on my Superfly flip mode frame. So at first it might appear that it doesn't have the same field of view, but it actually does. But it's something just to bear in mind whilst we watch this DVR. Now the Robin is running on its stock settings straight out of the box. Nothing has been changed, like the contrast and so on. And the Swift 2, I'm pretty sure that should be stock because I don't tend to change the settings very much. Now during this test it was actually early in the morning and super foggy, as you can see. Now, looking at this DVR, I would say at the moment the Runcam Swift 2 actually has a little bit more better of a picture. I think if I went into the menu of the Runcam Robin, I could bring up the contrast and try and get it up somewhere near the Swift 2. And if you watch the trees on the Robin as they come into shot, you'll see that they're kind of like misty in a way. They just don't have the same sharpness as the trees on the Swift 2. But again, maybe with a little bit of playing around in the Robin's menu, we may be able to bring up the contrast and make a difference. I wanted to get another comparison video showing it in non-foggy conditions, so I had to wait until the next day again. So moving on to the next day, we can see it's not so foggy and we actually have a bit of blue in the sky. And talking of that, if I pause the video and we have a little look at the differences we're seeing here between the Robin and the Micro Swift, we can see there's actually quite a big difference. On the right hand side, the Micro Swift 2 actually looks a lot sharper as it did in the previous video. Also, the clouds look completely different. We can actually see a bit more definition in the clouds rather than the flat look of the Robin. So when compared to the DVR of my first footage that I shot when the DVRs were completely different, it seems that the Runcam Robin just doesn't have the same HDR that I was expecting. And the story continues. If you look at the grass, you can see there's definitely more sharpness to it compared to the Robin on the Swift. And as I spin around, you can see that break in the sky there actually looks more defined on the Swift 2 again. And it's funny because when I was flying this Robin for the first time on that sunny day, the camera actually performed pretty good. I was very impressed with it. I didn't have any issues, but now looking at the DVR footage, I can see that there are minor differences. But let's remember, this is a budget camera, so this is what we kind of expect when you pay less for a product. But having said that, cameras have came along a lot in the last few years. In the making of this video, I managed to come across some old DVR footage that I recorded only a couple of years ago. Now look at the dynamic range we had then. It was absolutely awful. And the camera cost 3 times as much as this Robin does. So in conclusion, I'd say it was a pretty average camera, and with it being a budget camera, I suppose that's about right. I would have liked to have tested it in more sunny conditions, but unfortunately here in England it's winter and we are struggling to get any sun at all. So there may be people that have this camera already for testing and they're in sunnier climates, so we'll watch out for their DVR and see what they say. But again, let's remember how far we have come over the last couple of years with the brilliant picture you can get from such a small camera and from such a small price. If I do manage to come across a sunny day here in England, then I will do my best to try and get some video footage up so we can compare those two scenarios. But that's it for today's video. If you have any questions or comments, then please put them down below. If you have anything you would like me to test, then please also let me know down below and I'll do my best to oblige. Thanks very much guys, I'll be back soon.